I hope you agree with me on this, but I think it's fairly safe to say that Helldivers 2 has been one of the most successful and well-received games in recent years. Whilst I believe that holds true, the game has also landed itself in its fair share of controversy and is far from perfect. Recently on the channel, I posted my initial review of the game where I primarily sung praises of the joys of spreading managed democracy, crushing bugs, and spilling oil, despite the issues the game elicited surrounding launch. Since then, a lot has changed, both good and bad, and today I wanted to both summarize everything that has changed with the game since launch and update you on whether I still believe this game holds strong as my most recommended title in recent gaming. My name is BigWynter, and let's do this. For Super Earth. First of all, let's start with everything that has been added to the game since launch, as despite only being out for less than 2 months, there have been a ton of updates pushed and there has been a surprisingly refreshing amount of new content that's found its way into the game. I will also be going over the brand new patch notes of 2nd of April, so stay tuned for all the juicy updates. Starting with the additions, easily one of the coolest things that has made its way to the game has to be the mech suit. With a minigun in one hand and a fucking bazooka in the other, these bad boys are some of the most effective outlets for pure democratic fervor imaginable. However, to date, there are still a number of bugs with these despite a number of patches rolled out by Arrowhead. Whilst they no longer drop sometimes already damaged, they still fairly frequently blow themselves up with the rockets when turning too fast, although this is far less frequent than at their launch. Previously, they would also kind of be ignored by many enemies if a Helldiver on foot was nearby, but this has been patched as of the 2nd of April. Even with these bugs, they are still a highly effective use of a stratagem slot and are so incredibly fun. Next up, we actually have the 2 newest additions to the game, the HMG and the Quasar Cannon. Now, with the Quasar Cannon, it's an infinite ammo, single-shot rocket launcher very similar to the AT and the recoilless rifle, but with a charge-up time and a refractory period indicated now on the back of the weapon before you can shoot again. While slightly lower in both damage and splash damage than the AT and the recoilless, they're still able to one-shot charges and bot dropships and can routinely take down either Hulks in 1 eye slot shot or Bar Titans in 2 to the face. Personally, I think this is the goated launcher at the moment and is absolutely worth a stratagem slot. Now with the HMG, I'm honestly not too sure what to make of it. At the moment, it comes with 2 mags with 75 bullets per mag. It's got both medium armor penetration and it's got 3 RPM speeds, but it's only really usable when either crouched or laying down at mid or short range and only whilst ADS. The devs have recognized this unwieldyness and have reduced the max fire rate from 1200 to 950 RPM already to make it a little more manageable. And whilst the 2 faster firing modes will shred pretty much any target other than enemies with heavy armor, you burn through your mags so fast you just might need to pair an ammo backpack with it to make it usable. So to me, it's totally okay, but releasing it at the same time with the Quasar Cannon that just works, I'm picking the Quasar Cannon. Next up, we have everyone's favorite enemy at the moment, the Shrieker. These little bastards were dropped shortly after the TCS Tower missions were released and subsequently completed, and they have been routinely ruining my day. These flying Terminid enemies spawn around the new Shrieker nest POIs and missions and can wreak havoc on an unprepared squad. They're fairly easy to take out if you can actually hit them with a few shots to the wings, but that's easier said than done. They will swoop attack you, dealing massive damage if you try to spread democracy too close to their nests, and be careful to dodge out of the way even if you do take them out, as their corpse seems to have the weight of 6 neutron stars and will obliterate you with the gentlest tap. Although this is not nearly as bad with the latest patch, as their ragdoll damage has actually been massively reduced. Alternatively, you can either take out their nest from afar with a launcher, or you can call in a hell bomb up close and personal if you prefer a mission with a little more chest hair. Plus, they no longer spawn bug breaches themselves, so they're actually a little less menacing than at release. The 2 newest additions on the bot front, which I haven't actually seen in game yet, have come as a bit of a shadow drop and as a result of us failing the most recent global order. So next time you're out spilling oil on the bot front, look out for the new flying gunships. Yes, that's right, these bastards fly now. From what I've seen, they spawn out of these new fabricated towers which need to be taken out with a launcher or a hell bomb, much like the Shrieker nests. And be careful not to look up too often or you might just miss the gargantuan Power Ranger mech the bots have been concocting. Supposedly these giant walker enemies have been spawning on mission difficulties 8 and above and take a ton of punishment. Personally, I thought the bots were plenty menacing, but it seems Arrowhead decided us Helldivers require additional nightmare fuel to get the engines of democracy firing. All jokes aside though, I'm really happy to see new enemy types and mission variables already in the game so close to launch, and I'm excited for even more to come, which I'll touch on at the end of the video. But for right now, let's talk about the environment. And no, I don't mean global warming. Democracy does not slow for CO2 levels. I'm talking about the environmental hazards that have been added to a variety of missions. Yes, that's right. It's not just the old automatons and the terminids we have to look out for, even the planets are hostile. While spectacular to look at, Helldivers now have to pay close attention to and avoid meteor swarms, fire tornadoes, volcanic activity, tremors, and ion storms, as well as various temperature and visibility conditions affecting weapon firing rates and of course your ability to see. Whilst the former are primarily immediate threats to life, the ion storms are a pain in democracy's gooch, as it will completely jam stratagem use for their duration, including redeployments. And as of the 2nd of April patch, we'll also have to look out for blizzards and sandstorms, throwing yet another spanner into the cogs of democracy. None of the planets available actually elicit them as of this video, so I'm excited to see what these look like in game. And although these environmental effects have not been in the game long, the devs have already made a few balance changes since they dropped. The damage radius and velocity of the volcanic and meteor events were reduced, along with increasing the visibility of impact zones after receiving community feedback that they were just too difficult to avoid in the heat of battle. Personally, I actually really enjoy these modifiers, as it adds an additional element of chaos on top of what is already one of the most chaotic gaming experiences you could possibly hope for. Some would say this is an insane opinion to have, and to them I say fair. Now, I'll predominantly group these ones together as they've all come as part of the newest cutting edge Warbond. We've got 2 new medium and a light armor set with a 95% electricity resistance, so no more getting shocked through the rectum by your teammates blasting arc throwers into crowds, or when you stray too close to that forbidden stripper pole. And as someone who loves the arc thrower, I'm a little sad to see it's had a nerf with the most recent patch in the charge up time and the range, but at least it does cause some more stagger. But this in my mind is just a straight nerf. Also added in the same Warbond, we've got 3 new primaries, a secondary, a new grenade, and the localization confusion booster. Now, I'll be putting a full video out soon breaking down all of the weapons, so drop a sub and ding that bell if you'd like to see that, but for now I'll briefly touch on them. First up is the Last 16 Sickle, which is an energy-based assault rifle with infinite ammo if you're able to keep the weapon from overheating. There is a slight charge up time to the weapon that has gotten some people a little upsetty spaghetti, but honestly this is a great primary and well worth spending your medals on. Then we have the newest addition to the SG family, the Punisher Plasma, which fires an explosive energy projectile in some kind of lobbing arc, dealing good damage and some splash AoE for crowd control. I'm biased because it's really fun, but give it a go and let me know what you think yourself in the comments. Next up, we have the Arc 12 Blitzer, which is essentially the arc thrower's little brother. Obviously, with it being a primary and not a support weapon, it chains to fewer enemies and deals a fair bit less damage. And whilst it does also boast unlimited ammo, there are other shotguns out there that are better and more consistent for dealing damage and crowd control. Finally, on the weapons from this Warbond is the Las 6 Dagger, where honestly the only upside is that it's got unlimited ammo if you don't let it overheat. It's got less punch than your drunk uncle's piss stream, so I wouldn't really dash to spend your hard-earned medals just yet. The next grenade addition to the Helldivers arsenal is the stun grenade, which honestly took me a little by surprise. It hits a seriously decent radius, interrupting all but the Bile Titan, locking them in place long enough to cop a feel, hit them in the weak spot, or have them stand still whilst half a ton of Liberty lands on their face. All in all, a great piece of kit, especially if you've got another explosive option like an autocannon or a grenade launcher to close holes and stop some bot production. And finally from the Warbond, we've got the localization confusion booster, which increases the time between enemy encounters. So if you're not quite spreading the sheer quantity of democracy you wish to, this is a great choice as it allows you to complete some more difficult missions with fewer speed bumps. And final note on the Warbond, yeah, of course there are banners and capes and emotes, but as these aren't exactly the most game-changing features, I've not really gone over them, but feel free to take a look at the full list of the Warbond items, which I've linked in the description for you. You are welcome. Until now, I've spoken exclusively about all the good things that Arrowhead have done and how awesome all of these new additions are. However, let's maybe change that. Since launch, there have been a ton of patches pushed that have both fixed a number of performance and balancing issues with the game and also straight up broken the game for many people. Now, I could go through and list every single change for the various patch notes, but that would take forever as there have been more patches than toes on my feet. Why I've chosen this analogy, I don't know, but let me summarize the biggest and most important changes to the enemies, missions, armor, and weapons so you don't have to waste your time with nerd activities like reading. Arguably one of the most well-known and controversial was the first big balancing patch that brought about the doom of the railgun and shield backpack mains. In this patch, we saw a reduction in armor piercing in non-safe mode for the railgun, which meant that it could no longer melt through charger legs and Bile Titan heads like a hot knife through butter. And whilst the unsafe mode still packs a decent punch, the weapon is no longer the obvious choice as a support weapon, which I'm primarily happy about. The shield backpack saw a small tweak in the recharge delay after the shield was fully depleted, resulting in more time per mission vulnerable to enemy fire. Again, I actually like this change, as although the shield backpack is still totally viable and quite strong, it opens the floor to other combinations. Speedrunning, the breaker saw a nerf in both the mag size and recoil, the spray and pray saw a mag size decrease but a buff to armor penetration, and the Punisher saw a buff to mag capacity, stagger, and damage, and I think this mag capacity was the same for the Slugger too. The flamethrower and laser cannon support weapons also saw buffs with a DPS increase to both, 50% for the flamethrower and increased damage to durable parts for the laser cannon. A lot of people were especially unhappy with the breaker changes, but the nerf was primarily to put it back in line with the rest of the primaries as it was a little too good at launch. The previous breaker, shield, backpack, and railgun combo started to trivialize certain encounters in a game that's supposed to be brutally difficult. And at the time, yeah, the devs may have been a little inflammatory, essentially tweeting "get good" in response to the butt-hurtery in the community, but I found this so refreshing. Seeing the devs as just another player on the other side of the screen instead of this public speaker in a large company actually kind of gave me confidence that made me feel that we were in good hands. Also, as of the most recent patch, we've also seen another buff to fire damage overall by 30%, as well as damage increases to the Breaker Incendiary, the Anti-Material Rifle, and the Dominator, which has also had a stagger increase. Armor penetration values for the Slugger, Liberator Concussive, Senator have all been fixed, with the Diligence Counter Sniper being buffed to medium penetration, and all of these values are now displayed correctly in game. Although, sad news to my fellow Slugger mains, it now has reduced stagger, damage, and demolition force. Very big sedge. But on the bright side, the Recallers, Spear, and Guard Dogs now receive additional ammo from supply boxes. We also saw a buff to the Orbital Barrage stratagems, both 380 and 120, increasing their duration and tightening their spread as they were a bit shit, honestly. Now, onto the mission side of things. Personnel missions are arguably some of the least fun adventures in Helldivers, which has been recognized by the devs. And as such, they have reduced the number of civvies needed to extract in the higher difficulties, and they've also moved enemy spawns further away from the defendable location to give players more of a chance. Command bunker missions can now spawn on difficulties 5 and above, and the number of objective locations has also been increased as these missions were being completed way too easily. There was also initially an issue with farming Helldive Eradicate missions to farm their XP and medals, so to counter this, we saw a balance change in Eradicate missions requiring significantly more kills to complete and a higher spawn rate of enemies. In this same patch, we also saw a number of fixes, but arguably one of the most standout fixes was to the armor ratings. It seems that since launch, armor ratings weren't really reducing the damage as intended per their values, but this is now functioning as it should. Additionally, as of the 2nd of April, heavy armor now sees an additional 10% damage reduction and medium receives another 5. In terms of enemy changes, Charger weak spots were tweaked, allowing them to be taken down in 1 AT to the face. Bile and Nursing Spewers now do less damage with their Mom, I Threw Up, and Chargers now do less damage with their standard melee attack to Exosuits, saving you from being one hit from full health, which is always a nice boost right in the democracy. Additionally, super heavy enemies have had their spawn rates reduced since launch on difficulty 7 and up to reduce spawn spikes of enemies like Bile Titans, massively increasing the difficulty of missions, and whilst I do thoroughly love a challenge, this has been a much welcome change. And to be honest, all in all, this game is actually in a really decent state at the moment. The majority of crashes like certain weapon ADSing and the use of any arc equipment completely crashing the game have all been fixed. Although that's not to say the game is working completely as intended, and the following bugs are still causing issues for a ton of players. There's still a variety of issues with the friending system, including cross-platform invites not showing and not being able to unfriend or block certain players if they're added in a certain way, stratagems attaching to enemies but dropping at their original locations, customizations resetting after the game, and most notably, drowning in deep water with a vitality booster equipped will essentially put a Helldiver in a coma where they have no control and they need to be put out of their misery. Despite this nonsense and persisting issues, I think the majority of game-breaking issues have been eradicated, and those remaining are totally manageable. Except the whole crossplay invite issues with PS5, which is something I've experienced personally, so please get it sorted, Arrowhead. If you're playing with friends, a crash is just an annoyance, as you can always just rejoin, but if you're playing with randoms and do get a crash, you'll lose all mission progress and more importantly your time, which is obviously frustrating. And with everything said, I'm really excited to see what is next for this game, and to boil down the last 10 to 15 minutes or so, I still absolutely recommend getting into this game if you have not done so already. Democracy waits for you and you will be welcomed with open arms. I really love what Arrowhead has been doing in terms of releasing content in reaction to our action in game, much like in D&D. The fact that Joel, the game master, yes, Arrowhead confirmed there is in fact a man in the chair controlling the warfront, but the fact that he's been spotted dropping into missions, throwing unreleased content at random Helldivers is so hilarious. Whether it be via community-made footage or data-mined confidential material, the way in which Arrowhead is essentially gaslighting the fanbase into not knowing what is real or not is such a fun way to roll things out. I've seen a ton of footage floating about recently of possible Illuminate sightings, and I genuinely cannot tell if it's genius marketing for the devs or just straight speculation. But with the future in mind, with this latest patch, the level cap has been increased to 150. So if this video has convinced you to pick the game back up, or for the first time, I'll see you out on the warfront spreading managed democracy. Drop a like and sub if you enjoyed, as I'm looking to go full time with content, and your support would mean the world. Thank you so much for watching, and much love.